That's right. Grace and peace from our Savior Jesus Christ to you all. It is wonderful to be with you on this Pride Sunday. That is one of my favorite pieces of literature, and it was an honor to be able to share it with you all. Thanks for bearing with us. I got a little bit emotional in between. So, I've spent this past week at Holden Village. If you don't know where that is, let me just give you a bit of a impression. It's a place where I did not have access to any kind of computer system for about 8 days. So I had to handwrite my sermon. That's a new thing for me. We're gonna see how this goes, especially because my handwriting, pretty bad. Not good. So I'm gonna do my best to read it, and please forgive me if I have a few pauses, but first I'd actually like to begin with a bit of time of conversation. Pride Sunday is something that I think a lot of us have different relationships to. For some of us it might be very meaningful, for some it might just be another Sunday, and for some it might be the first time you've celebrated a Pride Sunday, or at least a more recent one. So I'd like you to turn to a neighbor, probably someone that you know, but also make sure that everyone has someone to talk to, and ask them. I shouldn't say someone that you know. There are plenty of new people here. Sorry, forget about that. Turn to someone that you know or don't know, and I would like you to discuss what is an identity that you possess that you are proud of. What is an identity that you have of which you are proud? There are plenty of examples. That could definitely be a gender identity or a sexuality. It could be as a teacher, a parent, a friend, anything. Think about it for a second, and then I'd like you to turn to someone close by to you, but also keep an eye out for those who might not have someone to talk to, and make sure you go and reach out to them as well. And take 1 minute each to just share an identity of which you are proud with one another. I'll wrangle us back for a second, but don't go too far, because I'd like you to now turn back to that person or those people. I saw some good groups of 3 and 4 forming. That's fantastic. I want you now to share that identity that you were proud of. Did you choose that identity, or was it given or assigned to you, or a bit of both, somewhere in between? Take just a minute for each of you to go around. Is that identity that you're proud of, was that something that you chose, or that was given to you? Go ahead, take 1 more minute. All right, let's gather all back together. I don't know that I won't go around with the microphone, but if anyone wants to shout out one of the identities that they shared, just go for it and I'll repeat it through the microphone. Does anyone want to share what they did? Teacher! Awesome! Woo! We love our teachers. Say again? Storyteller! Very nice. And I would agree, Jeannie. What was that? Minecraft! Cool! Awesome! Gamers, I love it. I'm one myself. Say it again. Father. Excellent. Grandparents. Lovely. Woman. There we go. Woo. There, yeah. Wonderful. Anyone else? Pastor's daughter. I feel that. Have a feeling there are a few others here. One more. Artist and a writer. There we go. I love it. Thank you for sharing, both with each other and then with the assembly. And Good Shepherds new and old, on this Pride Sunday, I would like to share one of my identities with you, or about one of my identities. I'd like to share why I came out as non-binary 2 years ago. Many of you know that I am not binary, or non-binary. That's not a secret. And pragmatically, that means that I use pronouns like they and them. But what it means is a lot more, and much of it is internal. It's something I don't get the chance to share about a lot, but I would like to share this with you, knowing that some of you might not entirely understand or be on board with non-binary gender identities. I don't share this to persuade you, but to tell you why this is important to me. And I share this with you because on this Pride Sunday, I want to trust you with one of the best parts of myself and why it is a part of my faith. The first thing I want you to know about being non-binary is that other people know that you are non-binary before you do. That's why I asked that question of, did you choose this identity or was it given or assigned to you? For me, it's some of both. Despite our society's commitment to the gender binary of male or female, people are incredibly apt at noticing and remarking when you fail to fit into a binary definition of gender, especially when you are a kid. I was raised in a small town in Minnesota, and I was raised as a man. But I was never really allowed to be a man. My mannerisms, my voice, my interests, my emotions, the way I carried my body were all deemed too feminine to be considered a man. And when I tried to put on masculinity, my performances were so pitiful that I was rejected all the more for these efforts. There are some kind of funny stories that I could tell about that. Not right now. And when I tried to enter masculine spaces with confidence, such as men's locker rooms, bathrooms, dressing rooms, a lot of rooms, or even just male-specific conversations, I was punished by my peers, either physically or emotionally. And yet I was not a woman. I was definitely I definitely gravitated towards the women in my life for their gentler treatment and greater acceptance of my difference. I appreciated the passion and sensitivity of femininity, but I couldn't understand why that wasn't allowed into my body. And so long I dwelled, this is what I meant by bad handwriting. And so long as I dwelled in my body, or in a body society deemed masculine, there we go, I was not allowed to enter into women's spaces. I was frequently told that I did not and could not and never would understand what it was like to be a woman, and this is true. There are many things about being a woman that I will never know or understand. But growing up, that left me with nothing, an absence, an emptiness. Neither man nor woman, forbidden for either option, I could find no security, safety, or stability in either masculinity or femininity. And what was especially painful is that so much of that messaging came from the church. My church, or peers who wore the identity Christian, were the most powerful voices telling me that I had to either be a man or a woman, but that I was not worthy of being either a man or a woman. I was made to feel chronically insufficient by the church, who insisted that God's plan was for me to be, or for men to be men and women to be women, and anything different was destined for damnation. And let's not even dwell what they said about sexuality. And yet I love the church because the church was where I found liberation, the hope of a better world to come. I found companionship in the person of Jesus Christ, the God who dwelled in masculinity but was remarkably feminine in his tenderness, gentleness, and his care for all people. He was such a gender rebel that the men of his world put him to death, but he arose, chosen by God to be too precious for the world to lose. The world needed the kind of love that transcended gender. The world needs the kind of love that rebels against all binaries for the sake of letting all people know that they are saved and loved by their Creator. And I found hope in that message of the church that broke through the restrictions that I encountered. And I made the church my home throughout my early adulthood, even as its members hurt me. The message of the church was so real and needed to me that I sought to serve the church with my life as a pastor. And so I went to seminary, and my studies at seminary confirmed that the gospel of our God proclaims liberation for those cast out for their difference, wholeness and restoration for those made to feel unworthy. Though all the while my seminary reinforced the messages of gender that I had grown up with, discussion of gender and sexuality was strictly forbidden at my seminary, and those who brought it up, students, staff, or faculty, were often punished by the institution. The message in and out of the classroom, at least as I experienced it, was that it was all right to be different, but only if you were quiet. Anyone who made noise, they were a problem. My candidacy committee, the group that helped me, or that moved me through the process of becoming a pastor, reinforced that message. Because I was not enough of a man or a woman, because I could not perform either Christian gender, I was deemed a difficult candidate for ministry. Add in a general desire to rebel against normativity, and I was told to be prepared for the reality that the church might not be ready for me yet. Do you know how painful it is for your selfhood to be seen as a threat because you are different? Do you know how hurtful it is to hear that the church that you call home is not ready to accept you? What's even worse is that I encountered the same response within the queer community. And now I want to make sure to name this here. For some, queer is a harmful term. For some who grew up in an era where it was used as a slur, as a term to hurt, that can be a hard word. In the wider LGBTQIA+ community, it has been reclaimed as an umbrella term, meaning one that kind of captures the whole experience in one single word. It certainly is easier saying one syllable than LGBTQIA+ every time you want to name that. So when I say queer, please know that is how I intend it. But within the queer community, there is also plenty of prejudice, sadly. While in seminary, I had queer friends for pretty much the first time in my life, but one thing you might not know if you are not a member of the LGBTQIA+ community is that it's not a uniform one. Some queer people experience the greatest amount of harm and prejudice from other queer people. Bisexual people experience a lot of prejudice from lesbian and gay people. Not all by any means, but it happens. But lesbian women have historically experienced a lot of sexism from gay men. Transgender people have constantly been excluded from wider queer movements that only care about sexuality and reject gender difference. And non-binary people, like myself, are often rejected for confusing the whole system of gender altogether. Asexual people have largely been ignored. And if you are a queer person of color, white supremacy and racism are all too present within the LGBTQI+ community. Every experience is unique, but the general message is the same. You are too different and will interfere with our goal to be accepted by society. So be quiet and get out of the way. We're not ready for you yet. There's that message again. We're not ready for you yet. I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom and gloom here. I don't want to sound like everything is terrible, but I also want to be realistic. So often the way that we depict progress in the world makes it seem like everything is better now, where the reality is that it's still very, very difficult to come out as queer in this world. Especially when the message you receive everywhere you go is, not ready, wait, maybe for the rest of your life. But 3 things changed that allowed me to come out, not just to myself, not just to my friends, not to my family, not to my community, but come out in my faith, come out fully to my God. First, I met my spouse, Clara, who saw and loved me for the person I am and waited very patiently for me to come out to myself and love myself as she loves me, and God does too. Second, a pandemic happened that dramatically slowed the pace of the world and allowed me to spend time with reading and self-reflection. Lots of bad things about the pandemic, but we did have some time to read. And the third thing that happened is that I was on a pastoral internship that constantly asked me to reflect upon my myriad identities and how they allowed me to serve as a conduit for the grace of Jesus Christ to a broad range of people. And so in this intense time of love, learning, and lots of reflection, I finally accepted the term non-binary. I had heard of non-binary people. I had known some in the undercurrents of seminary, and I had heard of they/them pronouns in college, but every time I considered them for myself, a door would slam in my head, amplified by the words, "not allowed." This continued for years. Whenever I considered that I could be something other than a man or a woman, I would be terrorized by the thought that my church, my family, my community, my people would reject me because they were not ready for me yet. But in the safety of internship, during the pandemic, I encountered the word anew. Basically, being non-binary means being neither male nor female. The positive definition is that being non-binary is being both masculine and feminine and beyond, or something entirely different. To quote Prince, "I'm not a woman, I'm not a man, I am something that you'll never understand." To me, being non-binary means that I am not a woman or a man. I am Bergen. My gender is Bergenness. And like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, Bergens are bouncy, 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 fun, 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 fun. And like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, I'm the only one. Being non-binary is reclaiming my gender in discovery. It's a rejection of the many people, institutions, social systems that tried to make me feel like nothing, an absence, a void for not conforming to the gender model of male or female. It is claiming myself as my gender, claiming communal identity and support with all the other non-binary rebels in the world. It is my way of claiming that God loves me for who she created me to be. That my gender difference does not separate me from the love of God. It brings me closer to the love of God and fills me with the life of the Holy Spirit. And it is for this reason that I find liberation among so many other queer people in the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. It reigns as one of my favorite stories in the Bible. For a bit of context, this story takes place after Pentecost, and it's the first time that a Gentile, or a non-Jew, is converted to Christianity, or rather, welcomed into Christianity. Eunuchs, for a quick bit of history, were a third gender in the ancient world. Men who had certain parts considered necessary to be a man in that time removed so they could perform certain high-level official function for empires. Some eunuchs were voluntary, others involuntary, but they were considered a third gender, an accepted third gender in this ancient society. So the baptizing of the Ethiopian eunuch is seen as a promise to many transgender, non-binary, and intersex people in the Christian faith, that God's message is for them, as affirmed by the earliest church. And I agree with this interpretation, but I also want to take this passage a step further by looking at the Ethiopian eunuch's central question. What is to prevent me from being baptized? To me, that is the question of queer Christianity. Most interpretations of this passage focus on Philip's invitation and welcome to the Ethiopian eunuch by highlighting his willingness to guide and baptize the Ethiopian eunuch. In the same way, so much function today in the dialogue of queer inclusion in the Christian church focuses on the willingness of cisgender, heterosexual, straight people and communities to grant welcome to previously exiled and closeted queer people. This perspective, though, preserves the power of the status quo by granting all authority over the Christian message to straight people and removing it from queer people. It tells queer people that they have to wait to be accepted into the Christian community and message when everyone else is ready. And the problem with this perspective is that it's not the true story. Notice in this passage that the Ethiopian eunuch has no patience to wait for a church that will accept them. They know that under the Levitical law of the Second Temple Judaism, eunuchs were forbidden from full participation in temple worship. They are coming back from Jerusalem, so they know this fact. They're reading Isaiah, they're reading the scriptures, they know. They aren't waiting for Philip to decide that the Christian church is ready for them. Immediately after hearing the message of Jesus Christ and the good news of salvation and liberation, the eunuch stops the chariot and points to water and asks, "What is to keep me from being baptized?" Knowing that the historical and traditional answer is quite a lot. There is a lot to prevent them from being baptized. The Ethiopian eunuch has identified a place for themselves in the message of Christ's liberation. They know that God's love is for them. They know that Christ died and rose for them. They are asking whether Philip's church is different than all of the other religions of this world that have come before and have no place for people like them and people who do not conform to normalcy. They are asking Philip to stand up for their welcome before everyone in this emerging Christian community. They're asking Philip whether Philip believes in his own message and whether he is willing to let go of anything that excludes people like the eunuch. The eunuch is asking, did Jesus truly die and rise for all people? And this question is what makes the Ethiopian eunuch a symbol, stand-in, and beacon of hope for queer people, people of color, and anyone whose identity has ever been restricted by the church. Anyone who has sought to bring their whole selves before the community of Christ's love, but has been told through words or actions that the church is not ready for them. The question of the Ethiopian eunuch reveals that the church does not get to decide what they are ready to receive, because if the church isn't ready to receive queer people, then how will we ever be ready to receive God? If the church isn't ready to receive people of color, then how will we ever be ready to receive God? If the church is not ready to receive, welcome, affirm, and celebrate and accommodate people whose identities have been outcasted by society, then how will we be ready to affirm, celebrate, and accommodate God? The queer question of the Ethiopian eunuch, what is to keep me from being baptized, may be rephrased in a Lutheran context to instead ask, what is to keep me from being saved by grace through faith? If the answer is something, then the church is no different than the oppressive status quo of our society. But if the church's answer is a resounding nothing, as queer, there we go. As queer people have always known, from the Ethiopian eunuch to present prophets of today, then the church becomes the greatest force of liberation and life on this earth. This is the great gift and challenge that queer theology, the theology of pride, offers to the church. It is the message that you already belong in the love of God and in the communion of the Holy Spirit. That when you look at the message of Jesus Christ and see someone who loved you for your identities, died for you and for your identity, and rose for you and your identity, then you can trust that your body with all of its identities is the dwelling place of the divine. This is true for everyone, not just queer people. The question of the Ethiopian eunuch is liberation and salvation for all, but it challenges the reality of a church history that has committed itself to a tradition of prejudice, hierarchy, and exclusion. And if queer people, people of color, and all marginalized and oppressed identities are going to be able to trust in the message of Jesus Christ, then the church is going to need to let those practices of prejudice and traditions that exclude go, so that people may experience that there is nothing to keep them from being baptized, nothing to keep them from being saved by the grace through faith that comes from Jesus Christ. And before I go further with specifics and say that we need to do better, please let me take a moment to offer an affirmation to the Good Shepherd community, because y'all are pretty amazing. This is a truly an incredible church community committed to change, welcome, invitation, and transformation, so that all may experience the liberating love of God. You are doing incredible work and have done incredible work. And I know that means that a lot of you have had to make a lot of changes in your lifetime that have likely been deeply uncomfortable. And let me tell you that those changes have been worthwhile. In a video that I helped make for the Southwest Washington Synod, the synod that this church is a part of, I said that being in a reconciling in Christ congregation, a congregation that celebrates Pride Sunday, feels like having someone watch your back, so that whenever I get nervous and afraid that I won't be welcomed, that people aren't ready for me, that people are out to hurt me, there are a plenitude of people behind me ready to put their hand on my shoulder and assure me that I'm okay. That is an incredible feeling. And Good Shepherd stands with some of the best congregations when it comes to welcoming and accommodating lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and beyond people. Truly, this is an amazing community. And we need to do better, because there are many more changes to be made before all feel welcomed, affirmed, and celebrated in this church, and because the need has never been greater. 1 in 5 members of Generation Z are LGBTQIA+. And that's just what statistics say. It might be more. Even more than that, pretty much everyone in that generation knows someone who uses non-traditional gender pronouns, like they, them, she, their, anything beyond that. Increasing rates of this generation and younger generations are coming out as bisexual, pansexual, or non-binary compared to previous generations. And this is wonderful, but studies show that those youth and young adults experience much higher rates of mental health conditions disproportionate to the rest of the population because of the amount of prejudice and exclusion they still face today, especially in faith communities. Many are also denied adequate health care access or are more prone to experience houselessness, hunger, and poverty, especially if they are also people of color. Every affirming adult presence in their world makes a difference. Every affirming and safe adult presence in a child's life and world increases their quality of life and chance of survival. And so when people who experience exclusion, marginalization, or oppression for their identity, for who they are, ask us not just to welcome them, but to accommodate them by making the necessary changes that make welcome real, it will be incumbent upon us to be transformed by their witness. When they turn to water and ask us, what is to keep me from being baptized, it will be our duty and our joy to let go of anything that keeps us from saying nothing and making that a reality. Whether that means making changes in our language for God, the hymns that we sing that exclusively use binary gender language, the marriage rituals we use that assume opposite gender partners, our use of only Father in the Lord's Prayer, our use of light and dark binaries. When people come to us and ask, what is to keep me from being saved by grace through faith, it is our responsibility as witnesses to God to let go of what gets in the way and transform the church into a place that more courageously proclaims that God's love is for the whole world. Because this is the great gift and challenge that the church can offer to Pride and the LGBTQIA+ family. The message that we are ready to be unready. The message that we are prepared to love first and understand later. For who among us can say that we were ready to encounter the love of God? Moses wasn't ready, Mary wasn't ready, Philip wasn't ready, the Ethiopian eunuch wasn't ready, and I certainly was not ready. But when you encounter God, it doesn't matter whether you're ready or not, because your heart fills with love greater than anything we can understand, and we can do no other than to share that love with everybody. To quote the great Victor Hugo, to love another person is to see the face of God. And we inherit a beautiful Lutheran Christian tradition that proclaims that we encounter God in the face of our neighbor, that we have the great honor of loving our neighbor for who they are in all of their identity, the very presence of God in this world. And while many queer people have been able to find stability and acceptance in their life with or without religion, many still struggle, especially with the onslaught of voices set against them. I am one of the deeply lucky ones. I had many shining stars in my life and a whole lot of privileges that made my coming out a joy, that allowed me to find a community like Good Shepherd, and that allows me to be loved by a community like Good Shepherd. Coming out as bisexual and non-binary has brought me closer to the lover of God and has increased my life quality, my joy, in ways that I never believed possible. And yet for so many, the struggle to find acceptance and safety in their identity is a daily struggle. And once again, this is by no means unique to queer people. Countless people have felt excluded from church or society because of an identity they have claimed or that has been forced upon them. We began by sharing identities that we are proud to bear because I thoroughly believe that we all have identities that we are proud of, or at least deserve to be proud of, and carry with pride. Some relate to who we are, some relate to what we do. But all of us also likely have identities that have been used to make us feel excluded at some point in our lives. To varying degrees, perhaps, but exclusion for who we are or for what we do hurts all the same because exclusion, oppression, prejudice, marginalization, and hate runs counter to God's message of saving love for all people. We as a church have a rich legacy, a terrific tradition of proclaiming our trust in the God who loves us for who we are, saves us exactly as we are, and transforms us into beings of even greater love. We proclaim that we are worthy of God's love, that we are enough for God, and when we believe this message and offer it openly and enthusiastically to all people, then we join together, becoming that great net of souls that can work miracles of love in this world. When we trust that God's love is for every queer person, straight person, person of color, person of European descent, person of all kinds of abilities or disabilities, traumatized person, teacher, student, child, adult, parent, grandparent, dead, living, plant, animal, rock, bird, and tree, then we encounter the love of God that moves mountains, heals the ozone layer, restores creation, reconciles injustice, repairs oppression, transforms sorrow to celebration. We have a witness to the love of God that changes everything. We have a message of salvation and spirit that gives life, literal life, to queer people and anyone who has been hurt for being who they are. We just need to trust that the answer to the Ethiopian eunuch's question, what is to keep me from being baptized, is a beautiful, resounding nothing. And then make it so that everyone can receive that message of limitless love. Can we ever be ready for that message? Can we ever be ready for God's love? Can we ever be ready for one another? No, we can't. But we can. There we go! We can be ready to love first, accept second, and understand later, and let God take care of transforming the world and everything else with the divine love that liberates us to celebrate one another for who we are. We may never be ready for God's love, but through the grace of Jesus Christ, we can always be ready to love one another and to answer the question of what is to keep me from being baptized, what is to keep me from the love of God with that beautiful, beautiful nothing. Happy Pride. Thanks be to God.